So you had an officer that was rude to you, and I apologize if that happened. You do have some people that are on a power trip. You have some people that are very jaded by what they see, and trust me, you ever do CPR on a baby and it doesn't survive, it stays with you. Those kinds of things are a real thing. I personally have not experienced that, but I know officers who have. But I'll give you a scenario. A young officer was telling me recently that he was responding. He was dealing with a tragic event where someone was dying, and it was a very, very tragic event, and people were getting violent at the scene. And then his very next call was a lady who was angry because there was the carcass of a dead animal out in the street, and she was demanding that somebody get out there and handle it now. Entitled much, but he was very frustrated with her. And I try to remember, I'm not going to tell you that I'm perfect, but I try to remember the thought, well, I'm glad that's the worst thing that's happened to this gal today, the worst thing that's happened to this guy today. I literally know of a situation where a guy, I believe it was a death notification, and I've talked about this before, but he went out and did like a death notification. It has to tell like a mom that her teenage child is dead and will not ever come home, has to catch her as she collapses, sets her down, has her call her sister, has her call her pastor. They're there visiting, and he leaves, and that all gets on you. All of that emotion gets on you, and you have to do something with it. And he goes to his very next call, and the guy's like, you need to go tell my neighbor that his bumper, the bumper of his car, is 1 foot over the property line I measured. You need to go tell him to move his car, as opposed to either A, go talk to the neighbor yourself and say, hey, would you mind moving the car? Or, I don't know, realize that it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. Oh my word, the bumper's in the air over your property line. Who cares? But I try to remember that at the end of the day, maybe that's the worst thing that has ever happened to that person. And you will have officers sometimes. I mean, there are officers who are on power trips. That is just a fact. But you'll have officers that they're trying to deal with something, and somebody will come up and be very upset, and they're like, hang on for me. And, step over there. And that's another thing. I probably need to talk about it in another video, but I don't know how many times I've been along for the ride as a chaplain or actually working as an officer, and somebody will come up on a traffic stop. I mean, and you've got somebody in handcuffs. Like, it's a volatile situation. Sometimes bad guys want to hurt. Sometimes bad guys want to hurt the officers that have arrested their friend, and then at that point, you're double checking everything and making sure that everything's safe, the scene is secure, and then somebody comes up and tries to interject themselves into it with just like questions about how to get directions to something. And I've literally had to walk over to people and say, hang on just a second for me. That officer's in the middle of an arrest. That is an active crime scene. I need you to hang on for me and not go up there. Well, I just have a question for the officer. That's fine, but your question will have to wait. And unfortunately, unpopular opinion, you may not like this, and I apologize, but it's the truth. We can get really, really entitled and feel like, well, I'm entitled to my answer right now, when that officer is actually dealing with a really dangerous situation. I have literally been pointing a rifle, it was a carbine, at a building, and as I was pointing this carbine at this building, covering a guy who was wanted for murder, attempted murder, and multiple people walked up. I'm wearing hard armor, holding a weapon trained on an upper level of the building, and people are walking up and wanting to talk to me and just ask me random questions. Not safe. And so at that point, give the officer some space, maybe call non-emergency and try to ask them, or ask an officer to call you at their convenience, but leave that scene alone and let them handle that in the moment.